Hello there, odd ones. Welcome to the Oddcast. Grab your peanut butter and relax your mayonnaise as we soothe you with our weirdness. Oh yeah. Get snuggled up tight and dim them lights as we take you through the odd side of the human mind.
Welcome everybody to the first Oddcast since we restarted Odd Street. My name's Tippy Oddman, and I'm here with my co-host
Dan Sullivan.
And today, ladies and gentlemen, well, let's talk about some Jesus.
Jesus Christ.
Let's talk about some Jesus, but even better, let's talk about some science as well, where they intertwine.
You mean science and Jesus kind of goes together?
Well, someone made it all, right?
Yeah.
That's where we're going today.
All right, well, with that being said, let me just say, people, we're talking about the Shroud of Turin today. I know it's been talked about a lot here lately. It's been kind of a big deal. They retested it and everything, and we're going to talk about some of the stuff that's been found so far and kind of the rules they have to adhere by to do the testing.
Well, it's a lot of it. Okay, so let's get some background on what it even is for those who may not know. Okay, what is the Shroud of Turin? It is presumably, or at least it is hypothesized, to be the burial cloth that was wrapped around Jesus when he was resurrected from the dead in the tomb. That is the hypothesis. That's the stated hypothesis. I think the Roman Catholic Church, who is the custodian of it right now, is kind of agnostic on whether it's real or not. They just kind of hold it up as a history item. But science, like you said, Tippy, is starting to show via modern techniques and modern testing methodologies that this garment that was previously tested radiocarbon dating in an infamous 1988 study where
I thought it was they tested it in the 1960s.
Oh, they tested it. Yeah, they tested it earlier, but the radiocarbon dating. Yeah, that's a good question. The radiocarbon dating happened in 1988.
Oh, okay.
1978, they started doing a lot of testing on it, and a lot of those started proving a lot of there was pollen samples that literally showed breadcrumbs leading from the Middle East to Europe.
Actual breadcrumbs or like hints.
Well, hints in terms of pollen. So, there's trace. Okay, so it's like what happens in forensic science. Okay, you have a piece of fabric. The forensic scientist wants to know where it was.
Right.
They can nail it down pretty closely based on pollen and things like that, right?
Yeah.
So there are over 100 scientific disciplines that have evaluated the Shroud of Turin.
Now, obviously, we're not going to go through all of them. But
no, and we don't have time.
No.
But what I'm getting at is there are over 100 scientific disciplines that have actively tried to disprove this thing.
Yeah.
As, okay, this has to be a medieval piece of art.
Yeah. The funny thing about that, it had gotten patched or repaired at some point.
So that was why the 1988 carbon dating showed medieval, is because it had been through at least three known fires.
Really?
Okay. Yes, and the most recent was in, I think, 1996 or 97.
Oh, wow.
The actual basilica or church in which it's currently housed in Turin, there was an arsonist that tried to light everything on fire, and there was a bunch of firemen that had to use sledgehammers to break it free from the bulletproof glass that was holding it.
Yeah.
So now they don't put it on display anymore. It's in a vault. It's in a vault. They will put it on display every now and then. It's about every 10 years or so.
Yeah.
But they keep it under lock and key now because there have been several arson attempts on it. And I guess it's 3 now so far. One of them caused triangular singe marks on the actual fabric.
Oh, man.
And they can be seen if you look up. If you do your search engine, DuckDuckGo or whatever search engine you tend to use, it's just look up Shroud of Turin, and you'll see pictures of it. We can post them on this podcast for you to see. There's triangular shaped holes that where there are singe holes. So part of the carbon dating fault is what happens in a fire? It releases carbon, right?
Yep.
When it releases carbon, what do you think happens to a carbon date test? It becomes flawed.
Yeah.
So modern day, they decided that there's a new way of testing fabric even in the midst of a contamination such as a carbon contamination.
Right.
It's called wide angle X-ray scattering. What they do is they take pictures, basically X-ray kind of pictures, and they look at the fibrils on this fabric. Yeah. And they know that certain fabrics have a predictable rate of decay, just like carbon-14 would decay, and they would just measure radiation decay. It's a similar decay kind of formula, right?
Yep.
But they can do it with fabric and pictures, and it's non-intrusive. They don't have to cut the fabric apart to do this.
Yeah, because I was wondering, the carbon dating samples, didn't they have to take a literal piece of it? So back to your question about 1978.
In 1978, they knew that carbon dating was going to be a thing.
Okay.
So they set up protocols that were supposed to be followed if they were to ever test the sample this way.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't follow their own protocols. What they did is they picked specifically a sample that was patched in order to botch purposely the test.
And we know that for a fact.
I know this for a fact from people inside the circle that did the testing in the 1988 test. Yeah, there was 3 universities. One of them was University of Arizona.
Yeah.
Okay. That they were supposed to have got 3 different samples from different parts of the cloth, if not more.
Right.
Okay? That's what the 1978 protocols called for. They didn't get that. There was one sample spread across all 3 universities. One of them, I think, was in England.
Huh.
And the one in the University of Arizona.
Yeah,
the University of Arizona was one of them. So anyway, of course they concluded it was from the Middle Ages. That's when they patched it after the fire.
Right.
What happened was there were sisters that didn't want the thing to fall into pieces and like fabric go everywhere. And they put a backing on it. Like if you've ever had a grandma that made a quilt, and she's got a backing layer on it or something like that to hold the patching together, that's all they did. That's it. And that's what these people tested on the carbon-14.
So they didn't test the top layer.
So let me fast forward to recently. So recently what they're doing now is wide-angle X-ray scattering. Okay. So what they're doing is they look basically at they're looking at a range of information on scans on this image, and they're looking at the decay of the fabric.
Yeah.
And when they look at the decay of the fabric, they can tell approximately how old it is when they compare it to a known sample. Okay?
Right.
Known sample came from Masada. So Masada had a fabric that they recovered that was anywhere between, like, I guess 20 to 40 or 50 AD kind of time frame, right? It was a known sample because of when the siege on that place happened. So because they had a known date, they had a known corollary, and they can compare it. The Shroud of Turin came from the time of Jesus. Emphatically.
It's crazy.
Without a doubt.
That's awesome.
Not only that, they can tell you based on the pollen samples where it was probably made somewhere in between India and the Middle East. It was probably a rich man's cloth. I would hypothesize, I can't prove it, but I would hypothesize Joseph of Arimathea. But it did come from the India area in terms of its fabric origin, and it migrated, and they can show this with the pollen samples. It came through the Middle East, and only then did it acquire bloodstains.
Yep.
An image which cannot be recreated. We'll talk about that in a second.
Yep.
We'll talk about the image of Jesus on it, or whoever died on the crucifixion. I hypothesize it's Jesus, but there's an image of a dead man on there, and we don't know what made. Well, we do know what scientific method made the image. We can't recreate it.
Right.
So you have all those things and bloodstains on a piece of fabric that is presumably the burial cloth of a person who was crucified in the Middle East around 33 to 35 AD.
Yep.
So somewhere in that range, you have a dead person on a piece of cloth. And this person, by the way, has a crown of thorns injuries on his forehead. It is a male depicted in the image. So it is a male.
Yeah.
And he does have a crown of thorns kind of injuries depicted that are consistent with that, at least on his forehead. I don't know that it was the crown of thorns, but it's consistent. And we have to be careful with our terms. It's consistent with it. It doesn't mean it is Jesus. It means it's consistent with it.
Right.
All the injuries are consistent. You got a stab wound on the side, as depicted. The foot injuries are there. We even, on this image, let's get to what the image even is. It's not a painting.
Yeah, I was watching some stuff on this here recently, and they can't, like, they're offering people money to,
if you can make one,
if you essentially recreate it in some form or manner, however.
So the theory is some medieval genius came up with a remarkable new way of making a new kind of art, right? Mm-hmm. Well, I don't think so. I think we'll let the science play it out, but let's describe what is actually there. Okay, what is actually there is a radioactive image. This is what happens when you take a photograph on photoresponsive film. So I'm a photographer as well as a tech guy. I do that for a living anyway. So I kind of know what I'm talking about. So this image, this Shroud of Turin, this picture of this person who apparently died of a crucifixion. This is not a painting. No one put ink on that canvas. It literally is a radioactive negative of an image. So what we're talking about in terms of photography with a negative is it's the reverse of the positive.
Right.
And that's how pictures were taken before digital cameras and all that. Is there would be photoresponsive material that would take the image in when the aperture opened up and it exposed it to light. Right?
Yep.
Okay. So this is if this is what we're seeing and scientifically it looks like, it's the very first photography object ever. Ever.
So like the world's first photo.
Ever. And it's on fabric and we can't recreate it.
Think about the amount of energy that, like...
They calculated it. It would take about 2 or 3 nuclear reactors to make that kind of energy.
That'd be crazy.
Now, here's what's more crazy. It's not the amount of energy. It's that it only went a couple of microns deep onto the fabric.
So it had to have been like an instant flash.
It was an instant flash.
So exactly like an old school camera.
They measured it.
Camera.
Yeah, they measured it. They know specifically how long. It was 1/40th of a second.
Man, that's quick.
It had to have been 1/40th of a second or it would have evaporated the entire fabric.
Right. There had to be.
It was quick. Just enough to leave
like a
picture.
Think about it.
Now,
it'd be like a blink of an eye.
Yes. And
how much light do you think that made? Because I mean, Think about it. And this is just me, like, if it was Jesus, he was in a tomb and there was a rock over.
Whoever it was, there was a thorn thicket around their face.
Yeah.
They had got scourged on their back numerous times with what's known as nowadays as a cat o' nine tails.
Right.
The same person had their nose almost broken. I mean, when I say nose, I don't mean the bones because that would contradict the Bible. I mean the cartilage in the nose was totally bent.
Yeah.
Not the bone broken.
They didn't punch him straight on.
No, they could prove that there's not a bone broken on this person because it's almost like an x-ray.
Yeah.
The fingers, one of the criticisms of the Shroud of Turin is the length of the fingers, but that's it. It's an artifact of what happens in an x-ray image. If you ask anybody who's ever done medical imaging, they will tell you that some of this happens where there's kind of a drift on part of because it's an angle of the
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So it's a very intriguing object, and what's really weird about the object of the Shroud of Turin is the fact that its history can be traced back to the 1300s, at least. So we know it's at least that old. We can trace its history. And what's weird is the part of the history that we can trace matches up with the pollen trace for the other parts of it too. So if you imagine like there's a trail you have and you only know half of the truth of the trail,
right,
back to the Middle East, we have half of it literally documented on where this fabric's been, and it matches the pollen samples. So we can extrapolate that the rest of it might be also true.
Absolutely.
Or at least it came into contact with something that was contaminating it in that way.
Yeah.
We at least know that.
Yeah.
So there's Bible references to this thing even existing.
Right.
If you look at the Gospels, Peter was the first one to enter the actual tomb.
Yep.
Other ones arrived before him.
Yep.
And saw what was in there and did not want to enter in there. Peter did. And he described two objects in there. One of them was presumably the Shroud of Turin.
What was the other object?
A face cloth. So there was a face cloth. I think they're holding it in Spain now. I have to look it up. But I think they're holding it in Spain now. It doesn't show the image on the face, but the blood spatter is identical if you overlay them on top of each other. And this is supposedly the face cloth. So the way that it helps if you understand how Jewish people do burials, or at least did in that day.
Right.
At least how they did in that day.
Yeah, they didn't wrap them like some countries did.
No, they had a very specific way. And not only that, but the weave pattern on this fabric is consistent with that burial tradition as well. Mm-hmm. So it matches that too. Like, who would know to even fake that in the Middle Ages? No one would even think that we would get into what's known as fabric, analysis. Who would think we would ever get into that these days? So if it's a fake, someone knew science way down the line and did a really markup job on faking it.
Egyptians knew how to make batteries and stuff.
Of course. But, so how much of it is hidden science? How much of it is just hidden knowledge versus just what it really is, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so, I am open to the fact that it could be a fake. But I'm going to tell you right now, if it is a fake, somebody really needs a big trophy.
Yeah.
Better than anything Leonardo da Vinci could ever produce.
Yeah.
Baghdad Battery, whatever.
Right.
You name it.
Right.
This is something else. And it's not something else because the artwork is just supreme and it just looks remarkably accurate and the angles are perfect. By the way, the angles are perfect. There are both vertical as well as horizontal blood spatter images one of the 100-some disciplines that have evaluated this Shroud of Turin has noticed, and these are the people that look at crime scenes.
Right.
So if you like smack someone with a hammer, they know which way you did it, right?
Yeah.
They're those kind of people.
Yeah.
They looked at this document and they've seen both horizontal and vertical blood drippages.
Mm-hmm.
So that tells you one of two things. They started wrapping the body while it was coming down off the cross or wherever, because this is clearly a crucified person, right? Mm-hmm. That's not in dispute.
No. I mean,
who it is absolutely up for discussion. But this is clearly someone who's got holes in their wrists and feet.
Yep.
They died of crucifixion.
Yep.
Not only that, we've tested their blood, and the blood shows high creatinine levels such that only can be described by a capital punishment type of excruciating pain.
Yeah.
Pain level.
Yeah.
So we know that this person died. Whoever is depicted in here, we know that they died.
Mm-hmm.
It's not possible to fake that amount of blood without killing somebody.
Yeah.
By the way, that blood is AB, which is consistent with the Levant, which is the Middle East. It's very consistent. So AB blood, very consistent with the Jewish heritage.
Right.
Hebrew, whatever, right? I'm not trying to pigeonhole them, but clearly possibly correlated and consistent with that area. Weirdly enough, the blood didn't turn as black as normal.
So is that suggesting that the blood could still be alive in some manner and just...
Well, that's a way of saying it, but that's not really scientifically accurate. What I would say is it didn't decay the way that we would anticipate it.
Right.
Alive, well, it requires a host, right?
Yeah.
Blood's just without the person, they're not there, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But no, it didn't blacken like it normally would have. I mean, is it dead? Of course. I mean, he's not there. It's not part of him. He's alive, presumably, if it's Jesus, right? Yeah. But he's not together with that. That's a remnant of him. So, but it's just it doesn't look like 2,000-year-old blood, even though it is. That's the best way I can kind of put it.
Now I seen.
I'm not a hematologist, so I can't really specify the science, but it just doesn't look like it should.
I seen little rabbit trail here. I seen a story not too long ago that they had found a tomb that had blood had seeped through from the ceiling.
Okay.
And either a tomb or a cave, and they was trying to say that the blood was still alive and had something going on with the DNA of it. You
might be talking about a Ron Wyatt thing from the 80s. He was known to have tried to find the Ark of the Covenant. I don't have much info on it.
Right. Yeah.
But no, he was reported to have tried to find that too. But it would be consistent with. Here's the thing, though.
Well, they were trying to say that it was like because they held crucifixions up on top.
So they did. So they did extensive blood studies on the Shroud of Turin. They really did. Okay, so let me go through some of that, and that might help with this. So when they did some of these studies, what they did find out is that the levels of creatinine in it were like high. Whoever's blood this was suffered.
Right.
It's the same thing they do at a crime scene. They can tell that the person suffered. It's what they would present as evidence to the jury to say that, it wasn't accidental. The person actually went through a bunch of excruciating pain.
Right.
Those same kind of scientific levels can be seen in this blood 2,000 years later. And so here's, again, let me go back to the other part. So whoever's blood it is, it's the same person's pretty much throughout. There's other traces of other DNA on the shroud, but I think that's from handling. But the blood stains from the victim depicted in this image. they were both vertical and horizontal, meaning they run a certain way and then a certain way.
Yeah.
Right? This way, then that way. Up, then down. Or up, then sideways, right?
Yeah.
So, because we know that that happened, that's very, very specific forensic evidence of an actual laying down of someone who's in rigor mortis.
Yeah.
The reason I know he's in rigor mortis is because the image in this is because of how the legs and the arms are formed.
Yeah.
The thumbs are stuck to the palms at a certain spot that can only be explained in a certain way by rigor mortis. Right?
So it's like your thumbs just automatically.
It's hard to fake rigor mortis if you don't have a modern understanding of it. And
right.
So back to their original carbon dating examples that were flawed, they said it was Middle Ages.
Mm-hmm.
They were still bloodletting in the 1700s.
Yeah.
So science was not there.
Right.
So where we are now is a more modern piece of science where we can look at this piece of fabric, and by the way, it is still the most studied piece of artifact of antiquity ever in terms of man hours. If you calculate it in terms of man hours thrown at it.
Oh yeah, I'd imagine something like this. I mean, think about it. Like
so back to the 78 and then the 88 kind of studies. When they opened it up for study, the custodians that hold it now is the Roman Catholic Church. But before that, it was the House of Savoy. So the House of Savoy, upon their death of one of their kings, in their, not to get into the too much history and bore people, but when he died in the, I think it was like 83 or something like that. It was like in the early 80s.
Right.
They bequeathed it to the Roman Catholic Church. So the Roman Catholic Church currently is the custodian of the Shroud of Turin.
Huh.
So they're the ones who hold it, own it. They're the ones who decide when it comes out for display. And I think the last time it went on display was, I think, 2015.
Really?
So we're going on almost a decade without even seeing it. But it fell victim. It fell victim to an attempted arson. Like I said, in '97, I think.
Right. I mean, I wouldn't blame them. Something like that, especially.
It's precious.
Yeah. No doubt. Especially like.
I'm not Catholic, but
no.
They need to be good stewards of it because of all the relics the Catholic Church has that I disagree with and I think that are absolutely bogus and just might be totally like wonky off the wall kind of stuff.
Right. This
one, again, is the very first photograph ever taken by anybody ever.
Yeah.
Known.
Yeah.
Anybody. Not by humans, anybody.
Even like whoever this was. Like, you know what I mean?
Whoever made this, it was the very first photograph.
Absolutely.
So I took a lot of French courses in school and stuff, so I can kind of speak French. So a lot of people who are into filmography and video and stuff might know who Lumiere is or was.
Right.
It was the inventor of like motion photography, right? Yeah. This stuff would make Lumiere jealous.
Yeah.
Because this is the first photograph ever. And if it is depicting who I think it's depicting,
yeah,
that's even more incredible because it means that it was the moment in time in which somebody rose from the dead.
Yep.
And it literally shows that moment.
That's kind of like, honestly, if it's not a work of art or,
and it's not, there's no brush strokes.
Right.
It's not ink. No one can recreate it. Back to what you said earlier in this podcast is, people are welcoming someone to recreate this and make a duplicate of it. I challenge you to do it, please.
Yeah, absolutely.
Number one, this is let's go over the things that would be required in order for you to recreate this.
Right.
Because number one, it would be really criminal. Mm-hmm. So don't take my advice. I'm just telling you how hard it would be.
Yeah, absolutely.
You would have to actually murder someone on a cross.
Right.
Then you would have to wrap them in a piece of fabric.
Yep.
You would then have to fold it over top their head down to their feet.
Yep.
You would have to then bind it around them such that it would wrap their body and kind of like contort to their physique and kind of keep all their body fluids once they're dead inside of it. And then you have to microwave them.
Yep.
That's the part no one can ever explain, is then you have to microwave them and make a negative image, which is what the Shroud of Turin is. It's the very first negative image of any kind of photography ever. So then you have to make a negative image of it. How are you going to do that outside of a nuclear reaction? They don't have a Kodak camera.
Nope.
None of that, right?
Right.
And even if they did, they would have to have a really big one.
And you ever seen, what's that stupid show? Ancient Aliens. You ever watch that?
I'm not saying it's aliens, but it's aliens. that guy?
Yeah. Aliens.
Absolutely. It's funny.
Yeah. You sit there and you watch that, and then you go and read through different parts in history and whatnot. There's no society Egyptians had batteries and stuff, and then, the Irish.
Oh, you mean electricity? Yeah.
Yeah. But nobody had, I don't even think they knew what a nuclear reaction was back then.
Okay, so you might be referring to like even the Baghdad battery or even like the pyramids kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Okay, so if all those forecasts or predictions or estimates are correct,
mm-hmm.
Cast that aside for a minute. Let me tell you how much energy is needed to make the image that we're talking about on the Shroud of Turin. Forget all the stuff in history because it doesn't even matter.
It doesn't compare. Well, that's what I was.
Well, it doesn't. But let me quantify this for you. You're going to need a nuclear reactor. Not only that, but there is not enough existing pieces of technology to do this on planet Earth. We would have to pick I can't remember what the term is for the tool it is that would be able to impose that kind of radiation in that very short burst of time. There are some. There's very few of them on the planet. But let me say this. You would have to collect all of them up, bring them into one place, make twice as many of them as you just collected up, and then you would still need a nuclear reactor to have enough energy to power it all.
And here's my question. Would you have to nuke it from the inside of the body to get it on the Shroud, or can you just nuke the whole room?
No, that's probably the most important question you've asked.
Yeah.
Let me tell you why. Because this radioactive encounter with the fabric, It didn't come from the outside of the fabric.
That's what I'm getting at.
It literally was folded over a 3D. It was literally folded over a 3-dimensional object.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
It was wrapped around the 3-dimensional object, and that 3-dimensional object had all the signs of torture, blood, death, and the radiation came from within, not from without.
Right. So
not from without.
Right.
They can tell with radiation which way it came from.
Right. Oh yeah. So hypothetically, if you were going to recreate this, you would literally
have to put the radiation source for your photography trickery, if that's what you're trying to do. You would have to put it inside of a dead body, inside of a piece of fabric.
That's like some Frankenstein stuff.
Again, no one can do it.
Man, that's crazy to think about when you put it that way. Like you would have to put it inside the body,
but then
that's
the awesome part of the science.
Have to set off the charge really quickly, like a blink of
satellites. Yeah, if you did that today, satellites will go crazy thinking that you're a terrorist. So don't try it. But if you do, notify them if you're of your experiment. Yeah, you definitely don't want those kind of folks showing up at your door. But no, what I'm getting at is, it would be an undertaking today. It would be an undertaking right now. In 2024, it would be an undertaking right now to even try that.
Yeah.
But we're supposed to believe that someone in, I don't know, the 1300s got up off of, I don't know, they probably weren't sitting on couches, but got up off their rump and said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to mess with everybody in 2024 because I know better than everybody. I'm not buying it. No, there's something else happened.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So whatever that is, I'm open to ideas, and I'm willing to change my hypothesis, proven differently. But what happened there? There was a flash of radiation. The image that we see on the Shroud of Turin was 100% created by a radiation burst. 100%. Provable. We know this.
Yeah.
We would not have known this in the 1800s. We would not have known this in 1905 or whatever it was when people were starting to show it around public, right?
Well, and that's what I was getting at with, the ancient aliens and stuff. Like,
I think it was 1880 something. Mm-hmm. So the very first time someone took a photograph of this shroud, it was in the late 1800s. I can't remember the date or who did it. And I guess it's immaterial. It doesn't matter because you could do the same thing now and you'll see the same results.
Right.
They just thought it was like a sepia painting. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean by sepia painting, where it's kind of like brownish.
Yeah.
It's like a brownish kind of like.
So, I know the shroud is tan, but what's this imprint?
It's
color?
very, very faint if you look at it in person.
Right.
But if you take a picture of it, your picture becomes not the negative. It becomes the reverse of the negative. You see what I'm saying? You actually then see the image when you take a picture of it. So what you're seeing on the actual fabric is the negative. Imagine
the guy that took the first picture of that and freaked out.
He did. He lost his skull. Absolutely lost his skull. He did, because he knew what a photographic negative was, because he was one of the only people on planet Earth who knew what it was, because there weren't many photographers in the late 1800s, right?
Right.
So this guy, he absolutely 100% knew what he was looking at was a photographic negative. But you know what? If you're the only guy or one of the only 12 or 15 people who know how to do this on planet Earth, and you see that, what do you think? He thought. He literally lost his mind and was, what?
Right.
That's a photographic negative. And everyone around him was like, what do you think? Oh, okay, cool. They didn't know what he meant. It's like Einstein saying, I just found a wormhole and it's right there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the guy totally the first person who took a picture of this thing really, really, really didn't know what he was dealing with. He's like, this is not possible.
Man, that's pretty crazy to think about.
It's literally a photographic negative.
Yeah.
You can take a picture of it and then you look at your picture and then you see,
you'll see it. But if looking at it in person, you don't really.
I've not seen it in person, but people who have that I've talked to, when I talk to them, what they tell me is you have to get about 30 or 40 feet back to see it. You have to get to the back of the room.
Yeah. See it from afar.
If you're up close, you're like, what?
What's the big deal?
It looks like a piece of
cloth.
Burnt cloth,
Right.
It's got burn holes in it. What? You back up and you're like, oh, wait.
Right.
So this thing's 14 and a half feet long and 3.5 feet wide or something like that. It's pretty big, but it was made to fold over a 6 foot tall person or 5'10" or whatever he was. Yeah.
So let's take a second here. Did they measure how long the body was?
Yeah, and there's always the worries of, does fabric extend or
right? Yeah,
does it? So no, they did. They have measured the image. Yeah, it appears to be like a 5'10", almost 6 foot tall person somewhere in there, depending on how much of the fabric you think extended over the years. Because let's be honest, it's 2000. If it is real, and if the dating methods are right, oldest it's 2,000 years old. If the radiocarbon dating fakesters are right, it's in the Middle Ages. So it's at least that old, right?
Yeah.
That's going to extend the fabric fibrils a bit, and it's going to kind of pull them.
Yeah.
It's not going to get shorter. It's going to pull them.
Right. Yeah.
So if that is the image, whoever that image is of, they're about 5'10" to 6 foot. It looks like. Yeah. And so if that's my savior, that's my savior. If it's not, I'm willing to accept it. But either way, it doesn't change my faith. The point is, I like the science behind it, because what science is trying to do is prove this thing wrong, and they can't. They really can't. They can't prove it wrong. They've tried.
Yeah. They
really have tried. And they even went to the extent of, I think they faked that 1988 radiocarbon dating carbon-14 test. I think they faked that. I think they purposely picked a part of the fabric that was definitely
I was going to ask.
Suspect.
Yeah, I was going to ask what you...
they sabotaged it.
Yeah.
They sabotaged it.
Because they faked it, and I'm like, well, okay, they just put out some phony test.
No, I mean,
I never tested it. You know what I mean?
The fake method was by picking the wrong sample.
Certain spots. Because
back to the original 1978 protocols for how they were going to plan on sampling, and if they did, it was supposed to be different parts of the fabric.
Right.
So later on, someone used the excuse of, we don't want to damage our relic.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so we'll just take the samples that they want from over here. And then they were like, okay, whatever. It ended up being a patched piece of the fabric that was holding the brittle parts together.
Right.
And it was so that the whole thing just didn't disintegrate and fall apart.
Yeah.
So they had a backing cloth on it just to hold it. They sampled that. That's not an appropriate scientific sample.
No.
You want to test what you're actually trying to test.
I mean, we've all been through science class in school, and that's like the first thing they teach you. You know,
direct observation.
Make sure if you're going to test something.
Well, then you need to have a control group, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Where was the control group if it was one sample divided by 3 universities? There wasn't one. It was the same sample divided by 3 universities. You get the same sample. There's no control group.
Nope.
You have to have a different corner or something.
Yeah.
So pick the other corner. Send that one off to the University of Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
So every one of those universities did their radiocarbon-14 test appropriately. They did.
Mm.
It was just a flawed sample. On purpose. So
yeah,
isn't that remarkable that it was an on-purpose flawed sample? But they did their test right.
I mean, there's no other way you can. At this point, you could say what you want, believe what you want, but
so then
that just shows that was on purpose. So how they did.
But then you fast forward, see, science is always going to catch up to you. This is the fun part I like about science. It's always going to catch up to you because there's proof somewhere.
Right.
Even if you try to lie, there's proof somewhere. So on this one, so it took a non-intrusive scan of X-rays, and they can now tell how old the fabric is. And they can prove the radiocarbon dating test methodology false because they pointed it at the right part of the fabric.
Right.
Guess what happens if they point it at the part of the fabric that was radiocarbon dated? It corroborates their test.
Right.
So what happened is it corroborates both pieces of science at the same time as it says you tested the wrong part of the piece of fabric.
Right.
So back to it. This is not a painted image.
So that begs me to ask another question because when you think about it, you said
there's no brushstroke. It's not a painted.
No. Yeah. That's not what I'm getting at. What I'm getting at is we know it's been sewn on. It's been repaired.
Yeah. Okay.
So is that backing the full size of the shroud, or is it just a patch? What's going on with that?
So if you
if they tested if it's fully backed by one big piece of whatever from the Middle Ages, why does the top show a body and the bottom doesn't? And why would you test that in the first place?
So good questions. Okay. So the fabric, if you can imagine it, it's like what would happen if you had a really long piece of bread and you folded it over on itself.
Right.
Okay. The part where the fold is where the head was.
Right.
That's how Jews buried their dead. Especially when they were doing it in haste. And when they were doing it in haste before the Sabbat, right?
So let's think about this. Was it a square and they laid the body on one side?
It was a rectangle.
And then folded over?
It was a rectangle. It was a long rectangle.
So it was folded over his head instead of up over the side.
Folded up over his head.
Okay.
So what they would do is they would lay the feet at the very base of the fabric, and then they would fold it over very simply over the top of the face. Now back to that piece of fabric in, I think it's Spain. They had pulled that probably off of his face when they put the Shroud of Turin on him. Probably. And I'll explain why I think that in a minute. But that piece of fabric at least got the same bloodstains. in the same pattern, in the same configuration and measurements as the shroud, right?
Right.
That's very hard to do, given that none of those fabrics stayed more than probably 2 decades in the same town as each other.
Right.
So that fabric that you see in Spain, it lines up with the Shroud of Turin. What it doesn't have is it doesn't have an imprint of the face like the Shroud of Turin does. So we know that they were separated at some point.
Mm-hmm.
We know that they were. When, how, we can talk about that later. But they were. At the moment of the resurrection of whoever was in this shroud, or whatever happened, I mean, they got light beamed to Mars or something, if not, right? Like, they teleported or something happened, right?
Yeah.
Whatever happened in between these two pieces of part of this fabric folded over across the head of this person, that person then became alive at that moment. And here's how we know that. Because the blood stains in this fabric on top of the image, not were there before the image was blasted by a radioactive pulse. But after the radioactive pulse making the image on the fabric, there is blood that arrived on that fabric after that part from the same subject who was then alive. Because it didn't have the same characteristics in those blood samples as did the tortured dead part of the blood on the other parts.
See, that's what I was going to ask, if they could prove that it was.
There was a living person in this fabric.
Well, yeah, but my point is
what's remarkable. What's remarkable is it was after they died. That's what's remarkable. Is it's on top of the dead parts.
Right. My question is are they able to test blood from both samples? You know, the shroud and then that face cloth, and look at the DNA.
They're both AB.
Both AB, but is it the same person's blood? Are they able to tell that through DNA? Okay,
good question. You're asking if they can get a whole genetic panel on them? No, it's too degraded.
Is it?
They tried. I really wish they could have, but I think there's probably a reason why we can't. I don't know what that would be, but it's degraded enough where all we really know is both of those samples are AB.
Okay.
We can tell the levels of all kinds of the proteins and things and the where someone was alive, then dead, then alive. We can show kind of that.
Right.
Because there are levels of different things that are just not possible unless you're either dead or alive, right?
Yeah.
So, and then which is on top of which one, right? So one happened and then the other one in sequence happened and then the other one.
Mm-hmm.
So you can tell sequences by where it is.
Dead, boom, alive.
You can tell.
Yeah.
Yes. It's like a timeline.
Yeah.
And this is forensic science. This is not voodoo stuff. This is not weird.
Yeah.
This is very, very I mean, it's complicated. I don't mean to downgrade what they do as saying basic forensic science, but it's standard. Right. It's standard forensic science, right?
Yeah.
They can tell. And let me tell you one other thing is, if it were possible to disprove this thing as even being its authenticity at all, they would have did it. They've been trying.
Yeah.
They've been trying.
How long have they been?
They've been testing this since at least 78.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, it's kind of limited. It's kind of limited when they can and how long they can.
With our science nowadays, look how far we've come as human beings. Even with our science today, you'd think
someone can make a fake one,
one, or disprove it in some manner or form. But
don't you? Okay, with all the fakesters that are out there, don't you think someone would love to come up with one and say that's the fake one and I've got the real one and here it is?
Yeah,
and here it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, I mean, I'm not advocating people should do that. I mean, that's obviously fraud, but I'm saying no one can.
And the thing that blows my mind about it, what even authenticizes it even more, I don't know if that's a word, but
Authenticize is a word, yes.
Is it?
Yes.
the thing is this is the only one. Have we ever found throughout human history something like this or another it?
Okay, great question.
It's the only one, right?
No. Let me be very clear. This is the only photographic negative that has ever been derived from a non-photoresponsive medium. The fabric is not photoresponsive. Everyone's used to digital cameras on your phone and your camera and stuff. But if you're old enough to remember the 1980s and 90s when you had actually film, where you you put it in your camera and wound it up and click, right? That's photoreactive medium, right?
Right.
Meaning if you expose it to a photo source, photo meaning light, a light source. If you expose it to a light source, this is getting geek photography, but if you expose it to a light source, it imprints whatever is in front of it on that image.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or on that medium, right?
Absolutely.
So that's a picture, and how long that aperture is held open determines kind of how much of the light hits that medium, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's modern science. We've only known that since the mid 1800s. Okay, you can get pictures of Abraham Lincoln, but you will not find any of George Washington, right?
Right.
So someone invented photography, and it's not been around that long. Even since the mid 1800s, no one has since then ever made a photographic negative on a non-photoresponsive medium. What I mean by photoresponsive, I mean if it's subjected to light source, it will then take the negative of that as a picture, right?
Yeah.
I'm describing in kind of more technical terms a picture. Take a picture.
Yeah, like Polaroid or film or you know what I mean? Yeah.
Right. All they did was they exposed light to photoresponsive medium, right?
Yeah.
Photoresponsive meaning if you expose it to light, that picture then comes upon it.
Yeah.
This is the only object to this date, even while we're speaking, that has ever had a photo negative without the photoresponsive medium.
Man.
This is the only one. No one can find another one. No one can even make another one. It's the only one. There is no other piece of fabric that you can do this to without actually pushing the relics and the evidence of actually pressing an image on it.
Right.
The ink or whatever. You have to do that nowadays or it doesn't happen.
Right.
You can't make this. You can't make the Shroud of Turin.
Man.
It's really something else, and no one can explain it other than it was a flash of light.
Back to what I was saying, it's one of a kind.
It's a flash of light, yes.
Yeah.
It's a flash of light.
It's the only one.
And whoever was in front of it during that flash of light had just died a very horrific death.
Yeah.
And whoever came out of that fabric when it was laid without their body in that tomb was bleeding alive.
Yeah.
We have a live and a dead person problem here.
Absolutely.
The dead person problem disproves the one, and then the other disproves the other. So we have a dead person disproving the alive person problem, and we have an alive person problem disproving the dead person problem.
Right.
Did he die? Did he? What?
Right.
It's both.
Yeah.
In one document, in one picture, in one piece of fabric.
It's crazy. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of episode 1. Episode 2 is coming. Keep an eye out for that. Let us know down in the comments if you like content like this, and maybe some ideas on later to date topics. Also, come over to our Odd Street page on Facebook. We have a group, and then we have a main page. We also have an Instagram where we post all our art, and of course the YouTube channel. With that being said, we love you guys, and we'll catch you next time. May the oddness guide thee.